I'm tracking the coldest weather of the season and its arrival in the US later this month. This is going to take over a huge chunk of the country with some extremely cold temperatures well below zero involved. For other places, I'm also tracking the potential for a couple of storms to develop in this time window, which may bring heavy snow to portions of the country as well. In this forecast, we're going to break down everything this week, which includes snow for parts of the country, the wildfires out west, and take a look at this Arctic blast that's going to arrive late on in this week. So how do we know it's even going to get cold? I'm going to show you the big picture here and everything I see playing out. And what you're looking at are the air masses that are at play across North America, and we're going to move this forward through the week here. So what I want you to pay attention to is the Alaskan area, and what we're looking for is a ridge, some of those orange colors to develop, and you see that begin to show up here by the time we reach Friday the 17th. This is what we call negative EPO, negative East Pacific Oscillation. Basically, what it is a ridge of air, and it sort of blocks that Arctic air from getting to us from the west, and instead it must come straight out of the polar regions. So you're going to see some of these blue colors, especially in Canada, begin to dive south into the United States. See that right there? And this is as we get into the upcoming weekend. So now we have our cold air beginning to set up in the U.S. What I'm also noting is a zone right here we call the baroclinic zone, and it really stretches across the U.S. like this. And in that zone, that's where there are favorable conditions for storms to develop. And this is going to occur between the 18th and the 26th. So in that zone I highlighted, that's the most favorable area, roughly speaking, for the potential at snow and at least some storms to form. And if I move this forward even further, you're going to see this cold air mass sits in the U.S. and it's really all dictated by our negative EPO out here. So again, this is the 19th we're looking at now, Sunday. I'm going to keep moving this forward, and you still see that ridge near Alaska, and while our cold air retreats just a little bit, it is still very favorable for us to keep that cold air in the United States here. The other player here, and a lot of our coastlines haven't seen much snow, is actually this ridge out here in the southeast. We did not have this in the last pattern, and we saw snowstorms go straight east through the country and miss some of those northeastern areas. With that ridge there, it's going to likely help deflect some of these systems farther northwards, and areas that have missed out on snow have a better chance at seeing it as a result. I want to take a closer look with you too here at some of the actual air masses close to the surface. And we're going to start here as we go through this week. There is your colder air coming out of Canada. Anywhere you're seeing those blue and purple colors, that's a cold air mass. So we'll move this forward here, and this week there will be some volatility, some ups and downs, some cold shots, some milder air. This is later in the week. There will be a lot of places that actually see above average temperatures, at least for a time. If you're on the East Coast, that's going to be as we get into the weekend. Looks like a really nice one. Central U.S. will be midweek. But once we get towards the end of the weekend, there's our first blast of the Arctic air taking over the U.S. And anywhere you're seeing those light purple or pink colors, that's really cold. That's a much colder than average air mass. So this is as we get into the weekend. Next week, it begins to fade a bit, but we get that reinforcing shot of cold air to follow because we have that EPO, that negative EPO in place. So as we get later into the month, I do expect we're going to keep some cold air sitting around here, if not even farther westwards. Basically, the Rockies and east all look very chilly to me. We can also take a look at some of the actual temperatures that our weather models are spitting out. I wouldn't put too much stock into this at this point, but it'll give you an idea of the type of cold we're talking about. So here we are this week, and first and foremost, we're talking about teens below zero in the north central U.S. That is some real cold, of course. That cold air is going to extend pretty far south, too. In fact, we may have just skipped it. There it is. Even getting through the rest of this weekend and into the week, there may be some 20s that slip into northern Florida. We'll continue to move this forward, though. You can see those 20, anywhere you're seeing blue colors, those are temperatures 32 and colder. We're seeing the chance for 20s pretty far south. We get mild as we approach the weekend. There's our return as that warmer air mass comes through. But what I really want to focus on, again, is what comes after that. And you're going to see here that temperatures begin to take a dive once we get late into the weekend. And there's that cold air rapidly spilling into the United States. We're talking about temperatures that may be in the 20s below zero across the Rocky Mountains region. We're talking about the potential for 20s below zero in the north central U.S. and just well below zero temperatures, or just even anything below zero, for a pretty good chunk of the country here as that cold air really settles in. And there's your coldest air coming in as we get into the middle of the following week. I mean, this is likely to be overdone. It's likely a little more extreme as our weather model's painting it. But regardless, you're seeing it drop numbers as much as 20 to 30 below zero in the north central U.S. A little unrealistic to me. I'd still add 10 to those at this point, but that still puts you at 20 degrees below zero in portions of the country. And you can see just how much of the U.S. we're talking about some of that really frigid weather. So that is the biggest story right now that we'll be following, not just today, but through the entire week as this approaches. I also want to talk about our potential for snow here. And while we can't nail down individual storms, I'm not even going to get into the storm tracks right now because you know that's going to change at this point. But what we can do is use some of our ensembles, which give you a broad range of outcomes here, and look a ways out to tell us where it's favoring snow. And we can get an idea of who is most likely to see snow while this cold air is here. And there are some things that really stand out. First of all, the Rockies, we have a decent signal for some snow to fall there. This is likely due to systems that'll be diving straight south out of the western portion of Canada. But we also have a gap here in the central U.S. And the reason for that is because it's likely to be so cold and so dry, you just don't get storms to develop. However, the farther east we look, you can kind of see that storm track I was hinting at. A good signal for snow out there in the northeastern part of the country, but we may even see snow across a good chunk of the Midwest and even the East Coast, as far south as the Carolinas possibly. So that's a good signal for snow in these two areas here. That's the American model, by the way. I figured I'd show you everything here. We're going to jump to the European model to get an idea of what it's spitting out. And if I move this forward, I'll keep those areas circled. You're going to see a pretty similar pattern show up here. This is, again, for the duration of that cold weather. And you're seeing basically the exact same as the American model. You have likely an enhanced area of snow in the Rockies. And I mean, we're talking about snow as far south into the mountains of Arizona and New Mexico and across the Northeast. A lot of that in Ontario and Quebec, but you also have a ton of it in the northeastern U.S., and it does hint at the potential for some snow even into portions of the south. We'll see what we can get there because we have the ridge that'll be sitting right off the shoreline. But nonetheless, you can see pretty clearly here the possibility for snow is, of course, going to be heightened with that cold weather, especially for some of those areas a little more northeast in the country and for the Rocky Mountains. Again, a pattern we'll be watching very closely as we move through this week and into the following week when all this begins to play out. So we've talked about some of the weather that's coming in the future, but what is occurring right now continues to be the disaster in California, the wildfires that are really tragic and continuing to burn across areas just outside of LA. And while this threat has lessened through the weekend, this is going to pick back up this week, and we're going to take a look at some of the fire weather outlooks here as we go through the first several days of the week. And this is Monday. Many of those areas that have already been impacted are expected to be impacted once again. You can see this area out here near Oxnard. That's a spot that's already seen quite a bit of wildfire activity. That's where a lot of it has occurred, right? Actually, in this spot here. And we're back to a critical level of fire danger. So this is your Monday. I'm going to skip into Tuesday now, and we see this threat begin to become more broad again as the general weather pattern favors development for those Santa Ana winds and very dry conditions. We get a high pressure system in the Great Basin, low pressure system to the south, and you're able to drive a lot of strong wind from inland areas out into the ocean. And as that slopes down the hills, that air dries and warms a lot, and it speeds up too as it cuts through some of those valleys. So that is why our threat begins to increase again Monday and especially Tuesday. But even Wednesday, we're still looking at a critical risk right where we don't need it, of course, in some of these areas that have already been impacted quite significantly by wildfires. Again, you can see that lone spot there, and this forecast may end up becoming more broad too, as it does appear to me the broad players are still going to be in place for that Santa Ana wind to remain strong. You know, a lot of times this time of year we don't get as much wildfire activity because it is the wet season, but there simply has not been much precipitation in this part of the country, which is why we're talking about this now. There is some better news, though. By the time we get to Thursday, it does appear our low pressure system that begins to move away, and as it does, it allows those Santa Ana winds to sort of break down a little bit more. So Thursday, there is some light on the horizon here, but I want to break down some of the actual weather conditions that are going to be occurring, and we can take a look here at some of our weather models, and we know that the wind is a big part of this. So anyway, you're seeing those pink colors, even some red colors you'll see a little bit later this week. That tells you where those winds are strong and favorable for wildfire development. So here we are looking at Monday, and as we go through Monday, you're going to see those winds really begin to pick up again, especially in those areas to the north And west of Los Angeles, you're seeing wind gusts here that may be getting relatively strong, and these are going to be more conservative numbers here, but easily into the 40s. I'd be surprised if they don't exceed that, as this is not our highest resolution model. But as we head into Tuesday, it gives you an idea of what's going on here. Those winds stay strong overnight. Tuesday, they in fact strengthen more, and Tuesday may be, like we saw in the forecast, the worst day. Could be some extreme fire weather conditions, especially in and around here, where we already have fires burning and where there is going to be favorable development for more or spread of fires currently out there. You'll see, though, as we head into Wednesday, that wind does begin to decrease a little bit. This is actually overnight into Wednesday, but once we get into Wednesday afternoon, as our systems begin to break down our big picture, so do the winds, and there may finally be some relief there. So the wind is a big part of this. Also the humidity, too, we can look at. Anywhere you're seeing the brown colors, that's where you have very dry air. We're looking at relative humidity here. And you're going to see that while we do begin to mitigate the threat heading into Monday, because you get some extra moisture off the water, that goes away pretty quickly once we get into the day Monday, and we don't get to recover that moisture so much at night. Notice those brown colors are going to stick around even after dark here, and that's a big problem because it makes it hard to catch up on the fires, more or less. Here's your Tuesday, still very, very dry out there, and into Wednesday, while there may be a little bit of recovery after Wednesday, Wednesday itself is going to be a very dry day. And like I mentioned a moment ago, this isn't our highest resolution model, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have some relative humidity numbers. In fact, I expect them to be into the single digits. And so that's why we have such a big concern for this part of the country as we move through this week. But it looks as though towards the end of the week, there may finally be some relief. Since we haven't gone into much detail on this actual week, I just wanted to end the video with a quick peek at what you can expect. And part of the reason we didn't focus on this as much is because the weather is kind of quiet, but there are some areas that will certainly see snow. And we'll start this off actually on Monday with a clipper system that will be continuing to move to the east, cutting across the north central U.S., may bring a light snowfall, but really what this is going to do is it's going to trigger some lake effect snowfall really across all of the Great Lakes here, moving through the first couple days of the week. That could add to some decent snow totals in those areas. But you can see as a whole, now that we're in the middle of the week, we're really being dominated by this high pressure system, which is keeping everything on the quiet side of things. It is also helping to keep that lake effect snow going as it brings that northwesterly wind. But as we move later into the week, you will begin to see some more systems begin to try to get in here. We got another weak clipper system that may bring some extra snowfall to those lake areas, to some of the hills in the northeast. High pressure stays pretty dominant here in the south. Didn't mean to do that. There we go. And as that high pressure sticks around, it is going to keep things dry for, like I said, a good chunk of the country, especially the southern U.S. But once we get later into the week, there's another clipper system coming through. This is going to attempt to trigger our first storm. This is getting into next weekend. We have another system developing out here in the southern plains. This guy's going to be riding up the coast. If these two areas of energy can meet up, there could be something of interest out here in the northeast as we get into the weekend. Right now, though, temperatures do look somewhat mild, and I am sort of favoring more of a rainfall if anything actually happens here. We're a week out. It's something that we're going to need to watch, but even the American model suggests that there may be some activity in this part of the country late in the week. So an area that we're going to keep an eye on, and by late in the week, I'm talking more Friday through Sunday window. But nonetheless, things do change quickly after that. And what you're seeing here, basically, that's our cold air mass beginning to come in. And we talked about how our whole pattern is going to begin to change. Our jet stream, you can actually kind of see it here. It begins to make a shape like this. So that's going to be the upcoming pattern to watch. And if I move this forward, don't take anything too seriously here. You can kind of see a couple storms developing and riding along the jet stream. Whether those actually play out, we are going to need to watch as we are still a week out. But that's your general pattern. And there are a couple areas that will see snow, as I mentioned a moment ago. Wanted to show you some of those lakes, and we're talking about a big snow for some of these places too. Anyway, you're seeing those purple and red colors show up. That's your 6 to 12 inch snowfall ranges. Again, you can kind of see that out there on the border of Lake Michigan, even on the border of Lake Superior in the northern portion of Michigan, the Upper Peninsula. You could see some snow. Some snow in Canada from Lake Huron, and of course, we're going to see more of that as we look towards the Great Lakes, Erie, and Ontario in upstate New York. Nothing substantial out there, at least relative to what we've seen in the past, but still, I shouldn't say not substantial. A good 6 to 12 inch snowfall off of Lake Erie out here. And we may see another good 12-inch snowfall off of Lake Ontario too. Again, this will just be gradually through the week, so it's not going to come all at once. But if you live in some of those areas on those lake shores, do expect it to be snowy this week. For the rest of the country, though, yeah, things do remain quite quiet as a whole. So with that, we'll wrap up our video this week. Of course, most of the activity is going to come after this week, so stay tuned as we continue to track that. And we'll keep you ahead of the rest of those updates out there, making sure that you know what's coming after the 7-day forecast. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. I'll give you a personal forecast. Make sure to like and subscribe and all that stuff. And we'll keep you updated as we track what is undoubtedly going to be an exciting middle and end of the month with regard to the upcoming winter weather.